And I don't think there was collusion going on, but definitely Morgan Stanley and Fidelity were on the same side of the table trying to get us to sell at a lower price. That's kind of how it happened behind the scenes. And I can talk about the next day and how it all develops. But that's,
so there are these micro conflicts, but they rear their head at the last minute in particular, right?
yeah,
At the last
it's
minute
really just a very last minute. And it's fine, you know. And by the way, there's a lot of talk around the pricing, and it pops so much. Whose fault is it? Morgan Stanley's fault. The founders make the decision on what the price is. So Dylan decided at the end of the day. And by the way, if you're Dylan and you're in your Figma, you had a very limited amount of shares that were selling. They were mostly secondaries. There's just very few shares to sell and a lot of demand from it. And if you're Dylan, that's going to drive the price up. The second thing is here's what you really want. You want Fidelity, you want T. Rowe Price, you want Wellington, you want Capital. There's like 6 big long-only funds you want in there. And they're pissed because they're not getting a big allocation. And so that created the demand environment that was a little tricky for them because they wanted to buy more shares. And that's what pushes the price way up. The supply is low, the demand is very high. But it's an interesting little chicken. You play chicken with your investment bankers and some of the long-onlys. It's like 7:00 the night before the IPO.
But there's no one dumb at Figma. This is the other thing about social media. You think Dylan and his whole finance team and CFO, like they've never heard of these issues before? I mean, everyone's trying to weigh everything and come out with the optimal outcome, right? No one massively mistakenly underpriced this deal, did they? We're not talking about rookies here, are we?
I don't think so. I think there are a lot of smart people around the table giving them advice, and they wanted to make their investors happy. So part of it also is you want a pop. You want Fidelity and T. Rowe and these long-only folks to come in and right out of the gate feel good about their investment. You want them to hold for decades and decades and decades. So there's a little bit of that. It probably just popped more than he thought.
And that's the active sentence, right? Until that, everything Brian said is correct. And the stunning thing is they clearly give the same speech every time. Because I've been in the room, I think 5 or 6 times, and and it's always Fidelity or one of the other two. It's like, you want Fidelity, it's only another $1, right? That whole speech is exactly right. And you want a little pop. The interesting thing that Brian said at the end was, the odd thing here is instead of getting, let's call it the designed 15, 20% pop that makes everyone feel good, you ended up with this absurd 250% pop, right? Which is clearly off the charts. I mean, I think it's the largest pop since 1999. So what you're really saying is you're trying to engineer this small explosion, and then every once in a while, inadvertently, you create a big explosion and you look like an idiot, right? So the question is, are we arguing about, do we need small explosions, which happen all the time? In other words, the classic HubSpot 20% pop. Is that a problem or not? And that's all about a $1 discussion with Fidelity. And then the separate problem of when you get it massively wrong, what causes that? They're two. I think you should talk about them separately because they're almost 2 separate issues. Does that make sense?
There's one small thing I heard nobody talk about on X on this. Yeah. So when my first startup job, they gave me the job, and this is the only IPO I'll ever be through as an employee. Okay. They gave me the job of handling the directed shares program. It was my job to hand them only the employees, not the external ones. Okay. And I went around, and there was a lot of drama because people had to come up with like 50, 60, 70 grand to buy their stock. This is not a lot for folks that had no secondaries. Okay. There's no secondary. And everyone in the company basically made 100 grand that day. Okay. And it was a magical thing. Now, was it underpriced?